Finally, the definitive way to read Fate. Fate Stay Night. One of the most popular, lucrative, and genre-defining visual novels ever made. It spawned about a dozen anime series, a couple well-acclaimed light novels, and multiple manga that strangely only update whenever FromSoft hasn't released anything in a while. Its influence as a series is vast. Even if you've never experienced a Fate work before, it's likely that one of your favorite writers was inspired by it. Or hey, even worked on a spin-off or two. Fate as a whole is a cultural touchstone, one of those evergreen things that shapes the landscape around it and will seemingly never die out. But how does one get in on the fun and actually start Fate? Until very recently, that question was one that plagued the English-speaking fanbase. The obvious answer is to read the Fate Stay Night visual novel, you know, the thing that came first. But doing that wasn't as simple as it sounds. It required jumping through a plethora of technical hoops. First, you had to actually track down a copy of Fate, but not the wrong version or else the following steps wouldn't work. Then you had to patch the fan translation in yourself, then troubleshoot for a couple hours, scanning over every file name because sometimes one just didn't format right. Then, once everything looks square, realize you have to change your locale to Japan or else the VN won't boot, which in some cases requires you get a locale emulator. And then, and only then, could you cross your fingers and pray it actually worked, which felt like a complete coin toss. Once it actually got up and running, it ran perfectly fine from there on, but the whole process was undeniably a headache. When I first wanted to read Fate Stay Night years ago, I spent a literal day just trying to get the VN to start. I was just sitting there in my dorm on a rainy day, my old laptop running Windows 7 blaring the same error messages again and again. There were guides, and nowadays even a program that will do most of the legwork, but the majority of people hearing that process are gonna be hesitant. Reasonably so, honestly. I personally thought it was worth the time investment to get the VN up and running after the fact. I mean, just look at my time spent reading. But it's a miracle I didn't just give up in retrospect. All of this isn't even mentioning the time it takes to read the thing normally, or the massive stigma against visual novels as a medium. 50 hours is a hell of a time investment, and to the layman, spending that on a visual novel sounds like a waste. Why try so hard getting an icky VN to boot when there's anime adaptations right there? Why waste all that time when you could just watch the truncated version? Which, I get it. I'm not gonna act like I also didn't lean towards that ideation when I was first getting into VNs. I feel the distaste for the medium is undeserved now, naturally, but looking at the Steam page for visual novels, I can see why it still exists even to this day. If I Wanna F My Mom's Best Friend was my only exposure, I'd also drift away pretty quick. But if you look past the shovelware eroge trash fires, visual novels can legitimately be some of the best storytelling out there, blending the strengths of books, music, and, well, visuals in a way no other medium can. Fate Stay Night ranks among the best of the bunch too. It was, and continues to be, genre-defining for a reason. But until recently, it was really difficult to get into, and had that double friction against it of being a VN. So people watch the anime on Crunchyroll or that funny little cat site instead. An anime that, you know, it's alright if you like the majority of your characterization left up to imagination. Because, as it turns out, it's pretty hard to adapt a VN on the scale of Fate into 27 episodes. It's nice as a supplemental material, but that's the kind of adaptation that leaves people coming away with wildly misconstrued ideas, to the point that some folk will actually look you in the eye and tell you to start with the prequel series, saying it's a grittier, more interesting story than the power fantasy-fueled FSN. That it takes place earlier in the timeline, so even if you want to go watch FSN after, there's no way it could spoil it. Man, people really will just say anything. Thankfully, those days of inane discourse are over now. The slow cultural warming up to VNs over the past few years has certainly helped, but more importantly, as of August 7th, 2024, you can just buy an English release of Fate Stay Night on Steam and Switch. Something which, had I not spent the entirety of yesterday reading, would still not feel real. I've spent years as a Type Moon fan expecting only scraps and gotcha from the land of the rising sun. But the past few years, this year especially, have been an amazing time to be a fan in the West. First was the official release of Suki-Ri, and now this. It took 20 years from the original release back in '04, but Stay Night is finally as simple to buy and read in English as it always should have been. No longer do you have to peruse the Mirror Moon website or Beastlair forums for patches and guides. It's just there. I know it sounds really weird to keep harping on, but as someone who's been a fan of the series, again, for years, it's just really cool to see. I never thought this would exist. Making videos about Stay Night was the reason I made this channel in the first place, and it was always a hard sell to get people into the VN no matter how much I praised it. But now I can just put a link in the description to the definitive version. Which, yeah, despite all of the niceties the fan patch offers, after finally getting it running, this new version is still the best way to read Fate now. Not even for some schmaltzy, ooh, this way you can support the official release type thing. No, this is just better, which feels rarer than it should be for modern remasters. Seriously, what is going on with some of these companies? Thankfully, this release goes above and beyond where I expected. That said, let's talk about some of the cons before we start the Jerkle Circ. These are mostly nitpicks, but I feel they're worth mentioning to cover all bases in this new version. First and foremost, music. The remaster only contains the updated OST that was present on the Vita version of FSN. For most people, this will probably be a non-issue. I know for the majority of fans, if they've read Fate at all, it was with the Vita OST. It's what's automatically selected in any modern version of the fan patch after all. But speaking from experience, I used to be a real hardliner for that original score. I found most of the tracks in that OG version just sounded better, more punchy, more atmospheric. So when I saw that this new version only had the new score, I was a little dour about it. That in mind, I never really read any of the VN with the updated music before. I just listened to the tracks on their own before reading and picked my preferred OST based on vibes. But having read the remaster for quite a few hours, I now find the take I had of original or bust a little dramatic. The new music fits and honestly created a really fun way to experience the VN again. I never found myself longing or even thinking about the original score, save for one specific track. Reflecting on it, I even find the new music more fitting in some cases, something I never thought I'd say years ago. That in mind, it still stands to reason that which OST you like is going to influence whether or not this is a big deal to you. Here's a brief comparison of the soundtracks, including that one particularly bad track I mentioned earlier. That'll be the first one up, and then the rest I feel more represents the good in the new score. Again though, if you haven't read Fate before, this is a pretty pedantic point and likely won't affect your reading whatsoever. That's just for the old heads like me or those who are curious. I'm gonna put a timestamp on screen for those of you who'd rather skip this. I just think it's interesting comparing the two. All in all though, this is a point I gotta give to the fan patch, as that just lets you choose which music you want to use. If the remaster let you mix and match tracks, it'd easily be a clean sweep, but as it is, it's no deal breaker. If it truly is to you though, keep in mind that someone has already modded the old tracks back in. They were quick with that one. Another point of contention people are undoubtedly splitting hairs over are some of the translation choices. Most notably, Artoria versus Altria. I concede that Artoria sounds better. Hell, it's even what the VAs say in-game. But let's be real, this debate is a nothing burger. Japanese doesn't really differentiate between L's and R's. Nasu saying it's spelt with an L specifically is a weird pedantic choice on his part, but I don't get why people fret so much over this. I see Altria and I just read Artoria. My brain sees the letters, but my heart sees the truth. There are many other things that could have gone awry in this translation with regards to nomenclature. Saber's name being the only real casualty is a very minor one I am willing to accept for getting Fate Stay Night officially in English. Again, give it like a week if it really bothers you. Like with the soundtracks, I guarantee it'll be modded out. Most of the translation discourse elsewhere follows a very similar pattern to Altria. Command seals versus spells, mage versus magus. It's a lot of small terminology differences, and to any newcomers to the series, I cannot stress enough, this does not matter at all. This debate only exists because of fan terms that were around long before official translations were a thing. It's on Type Moon for waiting so long to localize their shit, but again, it's not really a deal breaker for the official version to have mild inconsistencies with fan terms. Here's an actually big one people both new and old to the VN will care about. The H scenes do not exist in this remaster. Ren is still bisexual, but it's all in the subtext now. I realize this will probably be a contentious take, and hear me out before you run commenting, but I think this is good, actually. Not for some puritanical reason, one of my favorite VNs is Euphoria, after all, but because these scenes, blow for blow, are just kind of bad. I'm not even talking about just the writing, which, side tangent, the fan translation, as I understand it, really didn't do those scenes any favors. Just from a pacing standpoint, the H scenes hardly ever work and come at incredibly jarring times, as if they were randomly mandated from heaven while Nasu was in the middle of writing a scene. For example, oh shit, we're trapped in this abandoned fort with Berserker, the strongest servant who will rip us to shreds, barreling towards us. Time to fuck. I don't think it's hard to see that the best thing to come out of these scenes are the CGs. The artist, Takeuchi, was cooking with these. It should also be noted that what replaces the H scenes in the remaster are also like cool as fuck moments. Now, I would be amiss if I didn't mention the one exception, the one time where the lack of H scenes could be seen as a net negative. The third route, Heaven's Feel. I won't get into it for spoiler reasons, but it should be noted that some of the stuff in that story does work better in the adults-only version. Hell, it's why the movie adaptation kept those scenes in. That said, I don't think it ruins the story or anything to take the scenes out and leave it to implication. What you don't see explicitly, but the emotions you feel and take away from the work is, in my opinion, stronger than Nasu's shoddy eroge writing could ever be. You shouldn't bend over backwards to go read the original version over these scenes. It's something like a curiosity I'd consider checking out if you're truly interested after the fact. I'm not gonna say what we got as a replacement in the new version is perfect, but much in a similar way to how Suki Ri replaced the eroge of the original, I find it satisfactory. I think the movies for Heaven's Feel, with particularity to this case, serve as fantastic supplemental material once you've read the route proper. You know, if you want to see things in more explicit terms without reading the interesting lines from the original. Let's see, what else could be seen as a con? Well, there's no Welcome Me Paradise anymore. It was a joke scene hidden in the code of the original, so I don't think anyone's gonna mourn that too much though. The remaster uses the spoilerific Vita opening, so if you're reading Fate for the first time with this release, seriously, skip the openings. They're good as a greatest hits of their route once you've read them, but like, all of the cool reveals are in them, so again, skip them if you're a first-time reader. Oh yeah, that clip at the start. For the first few hours, the remaster on Steam was basically an FSN randomizer for anyone who didn't have their locales in Japan. Honestly, having your locales in Japan feels like Nasu's intended experience at this point, given that was a vital step in getting the fan version up and running. But the randomizer aspect was patched out of the remaster rather quickly. Wish there was an option to go back though. Reading Illya Stay Night sounds like the best way to read Fate. Oh, speaking of which, another con to the remaster is that there's no Illya route. The original didn't have one, but it was cut content that was almost completed by release. I even made a video about it years ago going over all the details we know about its development. The 20th anniversary remaster would have been the perfect opportunity to add it back in, but you know, Type Moon is just a small indie company making billions scamming people with a gacha game, so I understand it would have been a very big undertaking. Okay, that does it for cons. Time to gush about this new release because oh my goodness, it's great. First, look at this new UI. It is gorgeous and sweeps the original by a mile. It's clearly based off the Suki Ri UI, and that is only a positive because that UI fucks. Aside from looking very pretty, it's intuitive in how it's navigated, be it using a mouse or a controller, because this release also has full controller support, which might sound odd for a VN to have, but you have not experienced good reading until you've hooked up a Bluetooth controller to your PC, connected to a 4K TV, and read a VN on the couch. It is unironically a game changer, and I don't know if I can go back. Nasu's smoking on that crack pipe sometimes, but he was on that good when he said, "Read my VNs on a big TV or I'll find you." Back to the UI and menus. You have no idea, if you're new to FSN, how amazing it is to finally have a flowchart. This game has a 100% completion bonus for seeing every bad ending, and until this release, that meant following a guide to the letter to ensure you didn't miss a choice somewhere. God help you if you did, because that meant combing through the entire VN over and over, or in the case of most people, giving up halfway through and downloading a 100% save file. With this flowchart now though, you can just flip to any choice where you see an additional scene missing, choose the other option, and boom, the missing scene's right there. No worries about if you missed something, you can just see it clearly. For first-time readers, this can also help you get on the route you want to read, as it shows which choice leads to more points for your given route. I wish every visual novel had a flowchart like this, because as someone who likes to read everything a VN has to offer, I really appreciate this. On the topic of reading, this release is just hands down the best translation and localization we've ever had of Fate. I'm gonna put them side by side, feel free to pause the video to compare yourself, but the word flow between the fan translation and the official TL is night and day. I thank Mirror Moon for allowing me to get into the series proper, they are some saints. But when I was reading that fan TL back in the day, I would constantly have to reread lines multiple times, scroll back through the log to gather the proper context for a sentence, and pray that I understood what was going on proper. With this new release, I found myself only going back to see what the log part of the UI looked like. Shocker, it was really pretty. The new TL reads just so much smoother. You can see this particularly during the infamously dense explanation scenes. When Shiro and Ren first talked to Kirei early in the VN, I found the little idiosyncrasies of the characters near impossible to parse in the fan TL. I got the general gist of Grail War Fight or Die Yorokabe Shonen, but that was it. Here though, in the spruced up remaster, that Kirei loves fucking with people, and the why and how Ren finds Kirei disgusting comes across so well. Not to mention, Shiro's actually crass in this translation, a trait of his character you would have never known before. Reading the remaster, I found myself getting lost in the VN in a way I never had before. Hours just melted by while reading, and honestly, though I only intended to read a bit to see how the new version was, I think I'll read the Fate route in its entirety now. If you were a person who went through the hoops to get FSN running properly before this release but just couldn't enjoy it, try out this new version. It might surprise you. Steam's trial period is like 2 hours, so if you don't with it, you can get your money back. Or, you can try out the remaster through other cat-themed means. Another big boon to this release is, again, how pretty it is. Beyond the UI, I mean. You may notice that the VN now presents in 16:9 as opposed to 4:3. Unlike the fan patch, this doesn't crop off the top or bottom, nor does it stretch out the assets to make it fit. This is a true remastering of every CG, background, and sprite in the game to make it work natively. As far as I can tell, this was done with the original assets too, as it just looks too good. If they used a software for this, I will submit to my electronic overlords, this is a really bang-up job. I was playing in 4K on the big screen like I mentioned earlier, and let me be frank, the recording software I use does not do it justice whatsoever. Fate has never looked this crispy and succulent before. Compare, for instance, these ripped assets from the original to these assets from the remaster. It's not night or day or anything, but one definitely is a lot more beautiful to look at. I have a new appreciation for this era of Takeuchi's art after indulging in the remaster. These designs strike just the right balance of Saturday morning anime and unabashedly edgy and cool. It's so damn captivating to behold in such quality. I want to frame some of these CGs up and hang them on my wall. This one of Saber in particular belongs in a museum. The voice lines have also seen their fair share of cleanup in this release. Fate's Stay Night is a massive VN with hours and hours of recorded lines. As it was originally released on PC in 2004, however, there were no voices. The voice actors were first introduced in the 2007 release on PlayStation 2. As such, disk capacity was a concern, and those voice lines saw some compression. Even to this day, after a PC port in 2011 and a Vita release in 2012, these voice lines still contained a little of that compression. It's not super noticeable, but if you're wearing headphones, you can definitely hear buzzing whenever a line plays. Take this clip from Lancer, for instance. Again, it's not that noticeable, especially when music is also playing, but it's something that's always bugged me while reading Fate in the past. Now compare that exact audio in the remaster. It's so much clearer. I ain't ever heard this dude quite so well. It's like he's sitting right next to me telling me about how he's going to pierce my heart. It's a really nice quality of life to have these voice lines in higher fidelity. Like I said, it's really hard to tell the difference in the first place unless you're like me and have 20 real-life days worth of time spent reading Fate's Stay Night, but this is one of my favorite updates as someone revisiting for the upteenth time. It's little things like that that make the remaster truly definitive. Fate's Stay Night is one of my favorite visual novels of all time. This remaster is something I've always hoped for, but literally never thought would exist. If you've never experienced it before, don't be daunted by the time to read. If you get hooked, hours of well-spent time will just fly by. Furthermore, if you've only watched the anime, you've only scratched the surface of the story on offer. There is a treasure trove here for anyone willing to open it. I'm excited to see people reading this for the first time and getting to enjoy it in the best way possible. The adaptations of FSN, though having merits, I'm not here to dog on them, have never really done right by the original VN. Shiro feels like an entirely different character in some of those adaptations, but right here, he's the man. He's him. Reading these 3 routes, going on the journey, and falling in love with the story and characters is an experience I wouldn't trade for much. And now, it's an even better experience than it's ever been before. Fate's Stay Night has never looked, read, sounded, or felt this good to read. Honestly, I could keep gushing about this release for a long time. I didn't even mention the nitty-gritty things like how the page turner emblem animates or how the text box ripped straight from Tsuki-ri works so much better than the original literal text box, or how the page for the weapon descriptions is so much cleaner, or how the title screen is just so nice that I sat on it for 5 minutes straight. Legit, I have to stop myself here or I'll end up with another video project that never ends. I don't need to sell anyone on the idea of Fate. It's a seminal work that everyone has at least heard of before. I so rarely find myself shilling like this, but if you have even an inkling of an itch to read Fate Stay Night, be it for the first time or for the 100th, go buy this remaster. Type Moon is a strange company of strange choices, but if they keep this up, I suppose I can forgive them for peddling gambling addiction to the masses. I just hope we, see half of the new stuff they've promised sometime soon. Extra Record looks amazing, but I'll believe MahoYoTo and Red Garden when I see a trailer. Please, Mr. Nasu, inject that sweet Satsuki route into my veins. Until then though, actually getting Fate in English is pretty fucking cool. Thank you to my extremely patient patrons and all of you for watching the video. Like, subscribe, and comment who your favorite Fate heroine is. Warning though, there is a right answer. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm off to the editing mines to finish up a project I promised in December. Good night and happy reading, y'all. Well, since you're still here, here's a fun little detail I didn't have room for in the video. While combing through my files to find the different versions of FSN, I remembered the trial version from 2003 existed. This has a totally different translation done by a group called Insani, who I cannot find anything about for the life of me. This version, being a trial, only contains the prologue, and it's just such an interesting piece of media. It's from a time when Fate had not even begun to be finalized. It even contains a brief scene from the cut Illya route. Seeing this piece of lost media just right there gets my mind chugging about what could have been. This is kind of like when they found that live-action Backyardigans pilot clip in that one Nick compilation from the 90s. It's just very interesting. I want to read the Illya route. Other than that, that's it. I just thought it was a really neat thing to bring up, but there was no place in it for the video proper without it feeling shoehorned. I covered the trial edition a bit in that Illya route video I mentioned, but I might just do a deep dive on it wholesale one day beyond the Illya stuff, because even aside from that, this is such a weird thing to exist. I don't even remember the website I found this on anymore. I just remember it was after an 8-hour-long internet deep dive. Anyways, there's your little bonus feature for sticking around. Bye for real, y'all. See you next time.